Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to another tier list video, this time covering another one of my favorite Warhammer things, the Dreadnoughts of both Loyalist and Traitor origin. This isn't every single Dreadnought miniature, but it's most of the unique ones. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but obviously Dreadnoughts are hugely popular, so there's been a huge amount of them, so finding all of them is quite difficult. Anyways, let's get into this. We're going to start off with the classic Chaos Dreadnought, a model long since retired, since about 2010, I think is when this guy died. He's alright. Of course, I like Dreadnoughts, though the Chaos Dreadnought has never been my favorite. He was a very old model. I believe he came out in 1997 or something like that. His legs are very thin and spindly, which I don't particularly like, and his overall aesthetic is very 90s Chaos. It's looked very out of place for a very long time, and although it is not a bad model per se, it is a not very interesting one, and also is of course metal. If you threw this at someone, they would probably die, so keep that in mind. There is this one. I believe I just threw this image in by mistake, but it's the same kit, it's just a different loadout. So we're going to put these together, though I like the Night Lord's colors more. Next up we have the Librarian Dreadnought, recently deceased, of the Blood Angels. And I quite like it. I already put it in A tier, so I guess I kind of spoiled that. No need for suspense. The Librarian Dreadnought, though, very cool concept, obviously. It's a magic dreadnought with a giant halberd that it uses to thrust at people, and it teleports its buddies across the map and things like that. It is a Castaferum pattern, and I do like the Castaferum. I quite like my box knots. Though I would say this guy's probably going to end up near the bottom of A tier, or may even drop to B tier, honestly. Mainly just because when it comes to Castaferums, I tend to prefer the flat sarcophaguses, or the one where they just have a normal Space Marine helmet. While the gold head piece is cool, it's not a particular favorite of mine. This is the 2009 Forge World Death Guard Dreadnought, and I quite like this. From the 2000s till 2016, I guess, I really quite liked the Death Guard aesthetic. I quite prefer this version of the Death Guard to the more modern interpretation of them, just because I prefer the slightly more body horror, disturbing aesthetic they were going for. I think it was more unique. And this model is very good, though. I'm definitely putting this in A tier. I quite like this guy. A model I'd love to have, though finding these old Forge World models may as well be impossible. And yes, I know about recasters, but honestly, I've sometimes even struggled to find these on recasting websites. They're just so niche and they were so shortly produced, things like that. But I quite like this model. It's really, really nice. By the way, I got these images from the Lexicanum, which is a very comprehensive list of miniatures. If you want to get a closer look at any one of these, just go there. You'll find what I'm talking about. Next up, we have the classic Box Knot. I'm going to put this up in S tier. This is, of course, the Venerable pattern. But it's the classic look of a Dreadnought, and you can't go wrong with that. And the Venerable Dreadnought is just the best kit for the Castaferum that was ever released. So I think it's fitting to put it in S tier, and I'm glad that it's still around, and I think it will stay around for a while. It's got a lot of different weapons. It's got a lot of personality. It's very stout, very bulky, which I quite like, of course. Lots of options for weaponry. Overall, love the Venerable Dreadnought. And also, the Davian Thule Dreadnought in Dawn of War 2 is really cool. So bonus points for that. Next up, we have Bjorn the Fell-Handed, who I'm also going to put in A tier. Out of the Space Wolves Dreadnoughts, Bjorn is without a doubt my favorite. I just like his giant claw hand, but mainly because he uses an assault cannon, and I have a soft spot for assault cannons, so I'm going to put him pretty high up there. And I also prefer this look to the more explicitly wolfy look that Space Wolves tend to have, and not even like a modern thing. They've always had that very overt wolf theme. I think Bjorn does it the most subtly, and in my opinion, the best. Murderfang is not my favorite. The twin lightning claws kind of look, or I guess they're frost claws, is fine. I don't really like the exposed head, and let's be real, Wolfen are just worse. Like, they're dollar store versions of Death Company, and Death Company's cooler. So we're going to drop this guy, probably down in B tier. The Space Wolves Venerable Dreadnought, though, I quite like a lot more than I like Murderfang. I quite like the Action Shield build. I think it's pretty cool. And I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. Next up, we have the Redemptor. Pretty easy S tier. The Redemptor is just a taller, bigger version of the Castaferum, which I like. It's hard to go wrong with that. The Redemptor, of course, has the classic mixed loadout. The giant plasma cannon is always a win, and a big fist is also always very cool. Redemptor is insanely posable. Honestly, I wish I had more Redemptors, because I got my Redemptors very early in my hobby journey, so they're all posed really dumb. I'm looking at one right now, as I say that. But Redemptor's great, and I'm just going to throw the other Redemptor chassis up there. The Ballistus is my least favorite, but I still like the Ballistus. A lot of people thought it was weirdly proportioned. I think it's just because we're not used to seeing this akimbo ranged loadout on the taller legs, and obviously by now, I don't think anyone says that anymore. It was just a sort of a knee-jerk reaction when he was first revealed, but I like the Ballistus, I like the Brutalis, and I like the Redemptor. All very cool models. The Helbrute is just a more modern version of the Chaos Dreadnought, and in my opinion, a much better model. That's very cool, very customizable. I love the giant hammer. I love, of course, the Electro Scourge. Lots of ranged weapon options like the permanently overcharging plasma gun. And I know Helbrutes technically aren't Dreadnoughts, but they're Dreadnoughts. Let's not play semantics about it. So they're included. Next up, we have the Contemptor, and I like the Contemptor. It's not my absolute favorite Dreadnought pattern, but I do like it. It brings a very different air about it. It's less squat and bulky, more tall and gracile, if you will. And it's just it's a different kind of Dreadnought, and I appreciate that. When it comes to different kinds of Dreadnoughts, the Contemptor's the way to do it. I love the Contemptor. The kit's fantastic, obviously. I have a couple from Horus Heresy. And they're just a pleasure to put together, come with lots of options, and the whole way around. Contemptors are just really cool, and pretty solid as well, rules-wise. Leviathan is my favorite Heresy-era Dreadnought. It's just such a cool model, and honestly, I'm probably going to bump it up to S tier, probably right next to the Redemptors. The Leviathan is just awesome. It's, again, a bigger, bulkier Dreadnought, it's hard to beat the classics, but the Leviathan does a dang good job doing it. I love all its weaponry. I love the big claw, the big drill, the cyclonic melt-a-lance, storm cannon, the grav flux bombard. All of those are great, and the whole way around, the Leviathan is just a really cool Dreadnought. What's not to like? On the other hand, I hate the Deredeo. D for Deredeo. I think it looks dumb. It's weirdly squat, but its legs are huge. I think it's too fat as well. It doesn't really get either the bulky look or the tall, slender look down very well. And honestly, I just hate the Deredeo. I think it looks dumb, and I would never include one in any of my armies. That's my piece on the Deredeo. Next we have, this is the Contemptor Galatis, if I'm not mistaken. But very cool Dreadnought, so to say. I'm going to put it just ahead of the Librarian. The Galatis is really cool. It's a Contemptor Dreadnought that's a little bulkier, being Custodes, but also just sword and board is a cool look, and it always is. So, of course, giving this guy a giant walker, a sword, and a board is very cool. And it's probably maybe not my favorite Custodes Dreadnought, but at least second place. Love it. Next we have the, what is this one called? Blood Angel's Flying Contemptor is what we're going to call it. It's just a Contemptor equipped with dual lightning claws, and it has a huge thruster on its back to allow it to jump long distances. And it is kind of ridiculous, but also really awesome, because Warhammer inherently is very ridiculous. So this is just sort of the epitome of that. I'm going to put it probably at the top of... I'll put it next to the original Contemptor. I'll probably drop the Helbrute down to right here. Maybe. These top four in A are all pretty even in my mind, and they could really go any way you want. This is the Marigal Contemptor for the Word Bearers, if I'm not mistaken. I know that it is the Word Bearers, but I can't remember if it's the Marigal or if it's a slightly different pronunciation or something like that. But overall, the Marigal is pretty cool. It's I would say, more gritty take on a possessed Dreadnought than the Helbrute, but it's not as bulky, obviously being a Contemptor, but it's even more slender than its Contemptor brethren, just because it has the weird sort of, like its right arm is kind of just like a regular marine arm. If you see, it's got the regular shoulder pad. Don't know all the lore behind the Maragals, but they're fine. They're not my favorite. They're not my least favorite. Probably going to put them in B tier. They pass, but they're not excelling. Next, this is the Achilles, or whatever you want to call it, the Spear Dreadnought for the Custodians. And this one isn't my favorite. I just prefer the sword and board look, though of course this is still a giant Contemptor Dreadnought with a giant melee weapon, which is a winning recipe. I'm going to put it just behind the Librarian, or just above the Librarian. I like this guy's spear more than the Librarian's. Telemon Heavy Dreadnought, easily my favorite of the three Custodes Dreadnoughts, excluding the generic Contemptor. It's just a really cool model. Ginormous Dreadnought. You know, it's huge. It's got the big missile pod. Honestly, I wish it did more damage. That's the kind of thing with the Telemons, is I feel like they never do enough damage. But, I mean, they're huge. They're bulky. They've got giant shoulder pads. And they're pretty cool. So, that's that. This is the Osiren, I think it is. The Dreadnought for the Thousand Suns from Horus Heresy. Yeah, this is an easy S tier. Just looks really cool. I love the Egyptian aesthetic of the Thousand Suns. He's got I don't want to call it a chain fist, but effectively a chain fist with like a khopesh on it, which is a really cool look. It's got the flowing scrolls. It's got a cool head crest going on. Again, don't know the lore or its rules because I don't play Thousand Suns in Horus Heresy, but I quite like this model. And if I were to collect Thousand Suns in the modern 40k, I would 100% get one of these. Next we have a white whale of mine, the Alpha Legion Forge World Dreadnought from 2003. Now this one I have seen on the recasting websites, but honestly it's like, I want the original. You know what I mean? When it comes to something like this, one day I'll probably cave, but I'm gonna keep hoping out for a hero to find this Dreadnought. This Dreadnought's really cool. It's a Castaferum, of course. I love its helmet. I love the dragons on its breastplates, I suppose you would call those. And overall, it's just a really, really cool Dreadnought, and I'm sad that I don't own one. I'm going to put this up. This is going to be my favorite, I think. Really, everything in S tier could just be shifted around for the most part, except for the Ballistus. That one's going to be at the bottom. Like the first 4 in S tier can just be shifted around depending on my mood. But this Alpha Legion Forge World Dreadnought is just so wonderful, and I hope to God one day I find it. This is the Black Legion 2003 Forge World Dreadnought. And this one's a little more plain, unsurprising for the Black Legion, but not quite as exciting as pretty much any of its contemporaries, which makes it kind of boring. It feels like just the vanilla pick, which is, of course it is. It's the Black Legion. The helmet is just a big skull, which is fine. You know, skulls are cool. But the iconography on its shoulder pads isn't very interesting. And yeah, I think out of them all, this one's probably my least favorite. I'm going to drop him right next to the Margal. Not bad, not my favorite, though. Chaplain Dreadnought, yeah, easy S tier. Chaplain in a Dreadnought is cool because Dreadnoughts are cool and Chaplains are cool, so you put them together, you get something really cool. It's got the big wings. Of course, this guy isn't painted. This was a Forge World resin. I think it was a pure resin kit. Can't remember if it's a hybrid kit. I think it's a pure resin kit that was sold, but not anymore. And it's really cool, and I hope one day we get a Chaplain Redemptor Dreadnought, because that would also be really cool. Yeah, it's a Chaplain Dreadnought. Like, that just... Chaplain Dreadnought should be in the thesaurus as an alternative word for cool. Here is the 2003 Death Guard Dreadnought from Forge World, and similar to the 2009 version, I really like this guy. Again, it leans slightly more into the body horror. It does have some elements of the modern ones, like the eyes growing out of the shoulder or chest plate, if you will, but it still leans more so into the sort of aching sores and body horror aesthetic of old Death Guard, which I much prefer. And this is just a cool Dreadnought overall. This This is one of those ones where like the Dreadnought itself is fine, but it's just outclassed by its literal contemporary that was just a cooler version of it. This is the Thousand Suns Dreadnought 2003 Forge World. And it's fine. I mean, it's got all the hallmarks. It's got the weird skin face. It's got the Mark of Slaanesh. It's got a big speaker on the right. But I'm only going to give this one like a B tier because this is just the cooler version. This is the same thing, but equipped with sonic weapons. So it's the better, the cooler Daniel, the cooler Emperor's Children Dreadnought. It's got a huge sonic cannon. I think it's a Blastmaster, I think is what that would be called. And then it's got smaller auxiliary ones over top. And overall, it's just a much cooler Dreadnought. And it's going to earn itself a place just ahead of the Librarian. Here we are, the silly boys of Rogue Trader. These are the Imperial Dreadnoughts of 1887. No, 1988? 1989? Something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Might be 1990. But these are the first Dreadnoughts. They look rather ridiculous, and they're not really part of this. It's unfair to compare these guys to any of the Dreadnoughts after them, because they're all just, these don't even look like Dreadnoughts. Obviously, their design has been sort of co-opted by the ever popular Contemptors. I'm not going to deny that that's the case, but there's just not much to these guys. They're weird peanut-shaped guys, I can't say I like them, but I'm not going to put them in the Daredeo tier because I don't hate them. Someone keeps messaging me on Steam. Hold on. All right, problem solved. That was some sort of CSGO scammer. So we have, where was I? That's right, Ironclad Dreadnought. So this is a Castaferum Dreadnought with increased armor and a seismic hammer and a hurricane bolter, otherwise known as a bunch of really cool stuff put onto a Dreadnought, and then you give it extra armor. Yeah, it's awesome. The Ironclad is so cool. I wish the Ironclad was still around. Still holding out hope for a one-day Ironclad Redemptor, because that would be insanely cool. I'm probably going to put him right here. I love the Ironclad. The Seismic Hammer looks cool. Hurricane Bolters are always cool. The double Hunter Killers, awesome look. Whole way around, just absolutely love the Ironclad Dreadnought. This is actually the Night Lord's Dreadnought. I'm kidding. This is the Iron Warrior's Dreadnought. Why are you here? Go with your brothers. Where are they? Right here. I guess I included 3 of the same kit for some reason. Next up, again, 2003, Iron Warrior's Dreadnought. I quite like this one. It's a little plain, unsurprisingly for the Iron Warriors, but where it succeeds, where the Black Legion fails, is its helmet, or head, whatever you want to call it. It's just way cooler. It's sort of like a Mark III helmet, or Mark III, and that's just cooler, and it gives it more personality. And it's not quite as just all spikes the whole way around. I quite like this guy. I don't love him, but I will put him at like the bottom of A tier, I think. Just the helmet is what carries that. It's such a cool design for a Dreadnought. Next up, we have the Mortis Dreadnought. So the Mortis Dreadnought was around for a long time. It's a Dreadnought with 2 ranged weapons. But I believe they've always been paired, right? So you bring an autocannon on one arm, you get an autocannon on the other. You bring a heavy bolter on one arm, get a heavy bolter on the other. Heavy flamers. You get the idea. And, I mean, it's a Castaferum with just double guns, which is a winning concept. I honestly kind of like it more than the las cannon rocket configuration we would usually see on Dreadnoughts. This picture isn't the most flattering, though. I quite like the Mortis, though. I think... Yeah, I'll put him in S tier. Probably the bottom, though. I like the Mortis. He's a kind of a plucky little guy, you know what I mean? And just I didn't include the picture here for some reason, but if you've never seen a Mortis Dreadnought with dual rocket launchers, he looks so dumb. It's wonderful. I love it. Like, dumb in the cute way. Next up, we have the Night Lords, 2003 Forge World Dreadnought. The Night Lords one is pretty similar to the Black Legion, sorry. Had a brain fart there. It's got the skull helmet going on, the wings, and then just some trim. Not much to say. It's not very unique. The skull helmet is cool, but not outstanding. Next, this is the Siege Dreadnought from like 2004, I want to say, maybe 2006. This is sort of the proto Ironclad, even though I think there was an Ironclad Dreadnought out around the same time. Actually, I think this would be more akin to the Leviathan in terms of role, because it has the drill hands, which of course the Leviathan now has. Of course, here it's depicted with an Infernus cannon, I think is what that would be. But it's just kind of a taller Castaferum. Not a Dreadnought I ever really think of or I've ever really seen, but it's a fine model. It's just a taller Castaferum, and I mean, I should, by all rights, it should probably go like here, because it's just a slightly different Castaferum. I'll put it here though. I don't know. It's probably just the fact that it's, you know, an old. I'm not putting it in S tier. I don't know why. This guy just doesn't do it for me. Bottom of A. Once again, for our last three, we're back in 2003 Forge World land. First up, Thousand Suns. So this is what the Thousand Suns. I call it old aesthetic, but they weren't like the Death Guard where they went through a dramatic redesign. They still pretty much look like this. It has the stripes going on. I quite like this Dreadnought. I think his helmet's pretty interesting. I think it's like a T-visor sort of thing going on. Or, you know, just like a slit visor, something like that. And it's got the cool stripe design on one side and then the Mark of Tzeentch on the other. Solid as can be. Nothing too outstanding, but I'll put it just above the Slaanesh Sonic Dreadnought. Next up, Word Bearers. Much like the Word Bearers themselves, very forgettable, very uninteresting. I will put it above the Night Lords, but still, it's pretty forgettable. And then we have the World Eaters Dreadnought from 2003 Forge World once again. And this guy is a winner, 100%. He's got the Berserker helmet, you know, the Spartan kind of helmet. He's got the World Eaters logo on, you know, it's split in half, but on his chest plates. And it's a Berserker Dreadnought, which is something that, I mean, they have Helbrutes, but like, come on, give them a unique Berserker Dreadnought. That would be so cool. I'll put this one with the other god-specific ones, I'd say. And anyways, that about covers it. I know there's some that I missed. I think there was a Deathwing Dreadnought that I didn't include, and some others, but you get the idea. Basically, I'm a sucker for the classics, you know, Castaferums, the Redemptors, and I like Dreadnoughts in general, so you'll see that I really only dislike one Dreadnought. There are some that I'm indifferent to, but most of the Dreadnoughts I quite like. Let me know what you thought down below, and I'll see you all next time.